Hey, my name's Owen and I run a small film production company called On Track Media, and we specialise in making films and content for motorsport teams. Specifically at the moment, motorbike racing, it just seems to have been a bit of a niche that we found ourselves in. And I wanted to start making these short videos to give you a bit of an insight into what we're working on, how we're working on it, and some of the challenges that we're facing. So this is hopefully going to be the first of many, if I can get my arse in gear and make them often. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is the making of the Flying Manxman, which was a short documentary we made about 2-3 months ago, where we followed a chap called Paul Cassidy and his sidekick James at the Isle of Man TT. We went for qualifying week, so 4 or 5 days during qualifying week, to document what they were doing and how they were doing it, and some of the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations. And I want to talk about 3 of the most challenging things we came across, or the 3 biggest challenges, probably the easiest way to say that, when we were there. So let's get into it. Challenge number 1 was the fact that the island is not very accessible. Whilst the racing is going on, and for anyone who's not familiar, they close all the roads on the Isle of Man and race bikes at 200 miles an hour for 3 hours. And something that was complete oversight from my side of things was the fact that the island would suddenly become very inaccessible. So if we were in a position that wasn't right, if we were stuck on one side of the island and actually needed to get to the other one, to the other side, to get a good angle or a good shot, we couldn't. So for at least 2 out of the 5 days that we were there, we found ourselves stuck in one position and really had to be creative when it came to the shots that we were getting. So we'd have to change the angle, we'd have to change the trajectory, we'd have to go high, we'd have to go low, we'd have to walk down the road slightly and try and peer through a wall and make out as if it's a completely different part of the track. So that was one big challenge. One of the biggest things that we hadn't considered, and which was the second challenge, was the fact that the weather would be mixed, to say the least. So I think for about 40 to 50% of the time it rained whilst we were there, and that meant that about 40 to 50% of the racing was actually cancelled because of the weather, which I had completely overlooked. Oh, by the way, there's my dog Callie. Something that I completely overlooked was the fact that it was going to potentially rain, which I suppose is typical for an island in between England and Ireland in June, July, but it rained, which meant that we were already cut for time, we were already tight for time, but we actually had to be even more specific with what we were doing, because suddenly we found ourselves with 50% less time to actually capture the things that we wanted to capture. Third and final thing was the fact that live sport is just that, it's live. Things happen that you're not expecting. You think you have time to ready yourself for a shot and then something will happen. So quite often what we find is that we were waiting for the bike to come back and it would suddenly appear somewhere else, or we would be waiting for Paul to do a lap and then pull in and suddenly there'd be an issue with the bike and he'd appear way sooner than we'd anticipated. Or we'd expect James, the sidekick, James, who's the team manager, you call him the sidekick, he's the team manager, we'd expect him to be in a certain place and doing a certain thing, and he'd ultimately pop up somewhere else. We had to be really aware and hyper vigilant of what was going on. There are also so many moving parts within that paddock as well, so oftentimes we'd nearly get run over because you had to have eyes in the back of your head. But that live sport element is something that I'm certainly having to start to get used to, which is the fact that it's actually very, very difficult to predict where people are going to be, and you have to be ready. So you have to have both cameras on, both mics ready. You have to have people with their lav mics on so that you're capturing audio that happens, because things happen and you want to be able to capture those with sound bites. But yeah, they are the top 3 biggest challenges: the weather, the accessibility of the islands, and the fact that live sport is not easy to document. Thanks for watching.